Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. In today's show, I'm delighted to be joined once again by Quint Starkie. Quint is an English musician originally from Accrington, Lancashire, and he's now based in Stockholm in Sweden. With his latest solo album, Quintessential, aptly titled, recently released, Quint is fresh back from a tour of the UK as a guitarist with Tombstone Dunnery, a blues-based project and band formed by Francis Dunnery of It Bites. Hello and welcome back to the show, Quint.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
It's good to speak to you again after all this time. I think it was about a couple of years ago, wasn't it, when we last had a conversation?
It was, and of course the dreaded COVID came up, and that kind of made massive impacts on a lot of musicians.
Yes.
Musicians' futures. So,
yeah.
Back.
Well, anyway, it's great to have you back on. Thanks so much. Before we talk about your latest album and tour, and specifically for those people that haven't yet heard the earlier episode that we put out just over a year ago, please can you give us a brief history of your musical career and how you came into the music industry, Quint? And also, please tell us, because it's quite an interesting story, please tell us how you came to be based in Sweden.
Well, going back to how it all started, I guess, everybody has this story. They get asked, what inspired you to play electric guitar or guitar in general? And of course, everybody says, I saw Jimi Hendrix, or I saw this guitar player, or some kind of exciting, awesome story. But my story is I was watching Junior Showtime as a kid. And I saw three young kids, probably about 10 or 11, just sat on chairs strumming classical guitars. And I don't know, it's not as a pun, but it struck a chord with me. And when my dad came home from work, I'd already said to my mum, I just turned to her and said, Mum, I want to play guitar. And my dad came home from work and said, okay, if I buy you a guitar, you have to take proper guitar lessons. And I said, yeah, sure. So I started to learn classical guitar when I was about 12. I had a great teacher called Burton Granger. And I remember going with another guy, and he stuck it out with me for about 6 weeks, and then he dropped off. But I kept going. And I stayed with this teacher till I was about 15. And then eventually got to a point where he said, I can't teach you anymore. We've got as far as I've come in my guitar studies. And he was actually a classical pianist. So to him, well, can I start on piano now? And unfortunately, he said, no, I think you should stick to guitar because you seem to have a natural, adapt, or it suits you more than piano would, I think. And
that was the acoustic guitar, was it?
That was classical guitar. So I learned to read music from the get-go, which was great, and did all the classical studies. But I would have loved to have learned piano from him from then on, because you get to 20 and you can play piano and guitar.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about a piano is you don't have to cart it around necessarily. You just go somewhere and it's in the room and you can just go straight on it.
Well, that's interesting, because I listened to an interview with David Page, the guy from Toto, and he was saying that when he was about 15, he was playing in lots of bands, and he had this discussion with his father because he wanted to be a drummer.
Yeah.
And his dad said to him, you know what, you should think about the money even now, because when you're a musician and somebody's putting a band together, or there's a job opportunity, a keyboard player is always going to work, and a keyboard player probably doesn't have to take a piano with him because there'll be one in the place where you're going to play.
Yeah.
You don't want to be carting drums around when you're in your 50s or whatever. So it's something to be said for choosing the instrument.
Yeah. So you started off like that, and then you. I
started off, and then of course I got into. I think one of the first albums I got that really kind of changed my approach, because I used to listen to a classical album called Together Alone with John Williams and Julian Bream, and I played that back to back like for years when I was in my early teens, and then I got into Mike Oldfield with Tubular Bells.
Oh yeah.
And then I think a DJ friend of mine gave me the Boston album, and that blew my mind.
Was that with More Than a Feeling?
Yeah, the first one.
Yeah, great.
And then Thin Lizzy were a big influence. I got into Thin Lizzy, especially the Live and Dangerous album. I wanted to be Brian Robertson. I thought he was the coolest.
Yeah, classic.
I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Still is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, I joined what you would call working men's clubs bands, and did the tours of the working men's club with guys that were a lot older than me, but it was a great experience.
Yeah.
And there was a music store in my local town in Accrington, and I went in there one day, and the guys knew me and said, hey, there's a pro band looking for a guitar player for a tour of Scandinavia and Germany. Do you want to go for an audition? So I did, because I could read music. I think that's what got me the job, because they were leaving 2 days later. So
Yeah.
And it was everything from jazz to country to instrumentals to the top 40 of the day. So that was a great learning,
Yeah.
for future.
Yeah.
And then while I was there, I was reading Guitar Player magazine, of course, like everyone did, and I read about GIT, the Musicians Institute. And interesting story, actually. I was playing with this band in Norway, and a guy sent a bottle of champagne over to the band, and he was sat on his own. And so we went over to his table to thank him, and he said, "Yeah, guys, you're great. Listen, I have a yacht in the harbour. Do you want to come out tomorrow and have some champagne? We'll just do some cruising." So, we're playing a month residency. We said, "Hell yeah, we'll do that." So we're sat on the boat, and eventually we're all sat around the table, and this guy says, "Hey, okay, guys, so what are your dreams? What do you dream about doing, later in life?" And when it came to me, I was the youngest in the band, so I was like last to be asked. I said, "Well, I've read about a school in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, and I'd love to go there, but it's very expensive." And he said, what does it cost? I said, "It's like $12,000 for tuition and living there." And he said, "You really want to do it? Is it your dream?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Give me your bank account number and I'll put the money in your account. And if you ever get in a position to pay me back, do it. Otherwise, I'll just write it off." And of course, being from Accrington and being very cautious and suspicious, I said, "No, you're okay, thanks, but thanks for the offer." And I never took it. So I don't know to this day if the guy was genuine or not.
Right.
But
Interesting.
anyway, that planted the seed to go off to Hollywood.
And then you went to America.
Yeah, I did the audition tape, sent it in. I went over there and studied for 1 year, and it was amazing. It was, I went from like sitting on my sofa back home listening to Steve Lukather to sitting 3 feet away from him watching play at the big guitar.
Yeah.
Larry Colton, and these guys came into school all the time. So you'd be sitting one-on-one and jamming with Larry Colton. I mean, how cool is that? Or Robin Ford or Steve Morse.
Yeah.
I remember when they brought Dan Huff in. I don't know if you know Dan Huff, but he was like the session guy who took over from Lukather and Landau when they started doing more solo work. And played on everything, Michael Jackson, you name it, he played on everything, Boss Skaggs. And Tommy Tedesco used to bring these guys in. So he was sat on stage and Dan Huff walks in and we're like 100 guys just looking. And because the guy looked so normal, nobody clapped or anything. And Tommy Tedesco says, "Hey guys, this is Dan Huff. Come on, give it up for him." These guys are just human like the rest of us. But as a musician, you put them up there on pedestal.
You're in awe, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. Yeah. Maybe it just came from a Michael Jackson day. And it's just, but they're just normal guys. And so that was amazing. And I wanted to do sessions. That was my dream, to do session work. But they were so funny. I remember Steve Lukather and Jay Graydon coming in and just they sat on the stage and we just got to ask questions. And one guy says, "Hey Jay, when I finish school, I want to stick around and do sessions in town. Do you have any advice for me?" And he said, "Yeah. Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Minnesota." He said, "Go back to Minnesota. There's enough guys in this town," that kind of thing. It was great. So actually what I did there, I had a teacher there called Dan Gilbert, who was like my personal tutor who went above and beyond and gave me extra lessons, and he was so great. And just before I was leaving, he said to me, why don't you stay on and teach at the school?" And I said, "Do you think I could get a job here?" And he said, "I'm sure you could, yeah." So I kind of went back home because I had to, I had a girlfriend at the time. And when I was home, I got a message from my dad and said, "They called from LA. They said the answer is yes. What does that mean?" I said, "They want me to teach at school." So, wow, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So then I came home. I didn't even call the guy. I just packed my stuff and I flew back there and I met the guy and I said, "Hey man, thanks for fixing the job." And he said, "What job?" I said, "You called my dad and said the answer is yes. I thought it was about teaching at school." No. I just said, say yeah to Quint. This guy was like, I was like, say yeah. So I was back in Hollywood with a guitar, a suitcase full of guitar pedals and chords. And I just thought, okay, well, I'm not going back. I love it here. The first job I got was transposing music for a record company that did these dodgy compilation albums, send me a song and we'll put it on an album. And so I used to write lead sheets for that. And then I got a job, I got in a band actually that had a deal with good management. And while I was doing that, I did actually get a job at the school teaching. So I started teaching over the summer.
Yeah.
And but then the band thing took over, and then the management dropped the band and signed me as a solo artist, and we're going to make me the next big thing from England, as they put it. And,
just on the subject of learning the guitar and your guitar teaching and all that sort of stuff, for any listeners out there who play the guitar, maybe beginner to advanced level.
Yeah.
should guitarists, do you think, actually learn how to read music, or are our tabs sufficient?
I mean, the obvious answer is, does Paul McCartney read music? No, he doesn't. And Paul McCartney, the Beatles didn't read music. So, I mean, I think for some people, music is a language, and the better you are as a musician, I guess, the bigger your vocabulary. You can hear a chord and know what it is, and you can hear a chord progression and know what it is. So I don't think it would make such a difference over time. But I think for like I said, when I got the gig for the touring band, because I could read music, I could do the gig. I didn't have to sit down and learn all the songs. I could just do it live.
Wow.
I think that's why I got the gig, because the band leader would just shout out a number. All the songs were in a massive binder, and he'd say like number 65, and you'd get there and a 1, 2, and then you go straight away without
rehearsing it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why I think reading music is a large bonus.
Yeah.
But all my heroes, Steve Lukather, I mean, he reads to a certain extent, but he doesn't sight read.
No.
And then Tommy Tedesco, I grew very close to, he was one of the greatest guitar players of all time, probably the most recorded guitar player of all time. He once said, someone said, "Hey, how important is reading?" He said, "Well, at the end of the day, it's about music." He said, "No one has ever come to see me read. They come to hear me play."
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's. If I was sending my kids for lessons, I'd send them for lessons where they learn to read music. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's another tool to have, isn't it, in your arsenal?
Yeah, and you need every tool you can these days.
Yeah. And so, how did you come to live in Sweden, Quint?
Well, I was in Hollywood, and that was the second year I was there, and I lived together with a Swedish guy who was a guitar player too, and we shared an apartment with a third person who actually had the contract, so we were renting secondhand. Yeah. And it was an Irish Puerto Rican girl who had a very fiery temperament. And my friend Thomas, he was an ex-bodybuilder, so he had this habit of walking around the apartment, not fully clothed, to show off his body, I would say. Yeah. And naturally, this girl thought it was a bit, too much. So one day she said, "I think you should move out because I'm not happy with you." To him. So just before he was kicked out, he said, "Oh, I've got a friend coming to visit me from Sweden. It's a girl I usually work with at this nightclub where I'm working, and you should meet her. She's really nice." And so he got kicked out, and luckily for me, he met her, and he said to her, "Hey, you should meet my friend Quint. He'll be at the donut stop on Highland Avenue." It was this amazing cafe that sold donuts and coffee, and you could sit there and you would meet. You never know who you would meet. One day I was sat there at the bar, and there's a older guy sat next to me, and we started talking. And I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm retired now, but I used to be a drummer." I said, "Who do you play with?" He said, "I play with the king, Elvis." And the guy was DJ Fontana. It was like, he's Elvis's drummer. Anyway, I was sat there having a coffee, and they came by, and I got introduced to Sana, who became my wife over time.
Oh, right.
And we started, hanging out as a threesome, and feelings started to show for each other, and we had an amazing 4 months together, or 3 months together, and then we had the best Christmas day ever. And then the day after, she said, "Can you drive me to the airport? I need to go back to Sweden now." And I said, "What about us?" And she said, "It was just a bit of fun for me." I thought, oh my God. So, I mean, this is some of the songs on my new album are about this. There's a song called Hollywood, where I drove back into Hollywood, went to a diner. I was so sad, I had tears in my eyes, and I'm sat down at the counter for coffee, and there was a girl came and sat next to me and started flirting. And I just said to her, "You know what?" I said, "I'm flattered by your attention, but I'm the saddest guy in Hollywood right now. Do you want me to tell you about it?" And she said, "Nah, you're good." And she left. And that was, I just couldn't believe that it was just a bit of fun. I was so in love with her. So luckily for me, 2 months later, she sent me a letter saying, "Hey, I miss you a lot, and would you like to come to Sweden for 2 weeks for a vacation?" And,
so you had the blues for 2 months?
I did, and I bought a 2-week return ticket, and I flew to Sweden, and I never used the return. And we've been now for 30.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. We're still together, and we have 2 grown-up kids, Edward and Maxwell, and it's Life's amazing how life works. If my dad hadn't got that phone call mixed up, then maybe I wouldn't be sitting talking to you today.
It's amazing how things work out, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So last time you were on a year or so ago, we spoke about your album Ghost in My Heart, which I have to say is a great album, some lovely songs on there. But since then, you've brought out a new one called Quintessential,
I have, and it's
and that's
only
been highly acclaimed. Can you tell us about it, please?
yeah. Well, I started the song straight after I did Ghost in My Heart, but then things came in the way, like a lot of gigs and a lot of house concerts, and I had been over to Germany and done a house concert with Dory Jackson, and the house where we played, Rolf and Anka, they had a young daughter called Julie, who later that year when I was back in Sweden, they asked if she could come over and do some work experience in my studio. And I said, yeah. So she came over, and while I was showing how to record a song, I was showing how Logic works and how the studio works. And I heard her singing, and she had a beautiful voice. So I said, wow, you should, maybe you can record some backing vocals on one of my tracks. So I'd written a song called Endless Summer. So we did that as a single, and she was on that. And so I put that out, and I had basically about 8 or 9 songs written, demoed, but not finished. And then she came back 2 years later, which just shows you, because of COVID, all that time was still, nothing happened. I was on my way to Japan to promote the first album because my record company in Japan, they sell it in Tower Records, so we were going to do a promo, but COVID came and all that got shelved. So, so basically, I started to record the songs for real, and Julie came back, and it was actually a misunderstanding. She wanted to come back just for a vacation and stay at our place, and I somehow got that mixed up with, because I said to her when she said that, I said, could you record another track for me on my album? She said, yeah, sure. But somehow before she arrived, I kind of turned it around in my head to she was going to record the whole album.
Oh, so right.
When she arrived the next day, I had her in the studio at 10 o'clock. We worked till 6. Then the next day I did the same thing, and we just kept working. And she never said a word about, well, actually, I just came for a vacation. So she did the full album. And I had to get it out in Japan before the end of the year last year. And so it came out in Japan and sold through Tower Records with my record company, P-Vine.
Yeah.
But then I kind of felt that there were some things about it that I wanted to change, and there were a couple more songs that I'd written afterwards that I wanted to put on there. And somehow, I don't know how it's happened, but a year has gone by, and now I'm just addressing the fact that I need to get my finger out and get it out there. So
it's due for release next year, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It has to come out next year. I mean, it's been ridiculous how long it's. But you know what? It is. Life gets in the way.
Yeah, of course it does.
The Tombstone thing came up.
And is it in a similar sort of vein to Ghost in My Heart?
It is, yeah. It's kind of like I didn't have enough space on the first album to get all the tracks. Yeah. Like the Hollywood song was written around the same time, and it's about that. My future wife leaving me in Hollywood, and first you say you love me, and then you're saying you don't. You're leaving me, but leading me on. All that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I'm very happy with the songs on the new album. I think. And then I got this review of another podcast called Inside Musicast. The guys are based in the States, and they loved it and chose it as one of their albums of the year. So,
yes, I saw that. That's great.
That was nice.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to hearing it. I must admit, but it is available in Japan. This is the first rendition.
It is, yeah, and unfortunately, it's very expensive to buy from Japan. With the postage and the tax and stuff, which is a shame. But I might put it out on Bandcamp before Christmas. I don't know. I'm thinking about it, but I think it might be wise to wait until I have the album exactly as I want it.
And will it be available on CD and vinyl?
Vinyl especially. I'm going to press the first album in vinyl as well.
Oh, excellent.
Talking to Francis' friend Chris Topham.
It's amazing how popular vinyl seems to be again.
Yeah, I think it's the romance thing. One, it does sound better, and two, our generation, we grew up listening to that kind of. That's how we listen to music. The smell of the vinyl, the gatefold sleeves that had all the information, pictures on it.
Yes, and you actually have something to have and hold and take somewhere and have a look at and spill beer over or whatever. I must admit, I don't know whether it's the same in Sweden, but we have quite a number of small, should we say, small one-man band or one-lady band vinyl shops springing up in towns and cities. Is it the same in Sweden?
Yeah, we've always had quite a lot of vinyl places actually. So it's. I just have to let my dog in because she's going to make a noise. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
There you go. We've always had quite a few shops. They didn't seem to close down here. So
no.
And Sweden is it's a real music city. People are there's so many bands and everybody has a studio at home. It's just
Yeah.
they love music.
Yeah, I'd heard that you mentioned him a bit earlier on, but Brian Robertson, doesn't he live in Sweden?
He does. He lives I'd say about 40 minutes from me. I've met him a few times around
Yeah.
town and,
Yeah.
at gigs and stuff. So
Yeah. So you're fresh back from a UK tour with Francis Dunnery's Blues Project.
Yes, and it was amazing. We had such a great time. We did 8 gigs in 8 days, and we'd covered over 2,000 miles in our
Wow.
tour bus, which was wonderful.
Yeah. And this was, I say a blues project because normally Francis Dunnery is associated with, prog, his own sort of acoustic type stuff. But this was something quite different.
Yeah, this is, he's really serious about this. This is like a 5-year project, as he calls it. So he really wants to. And the difference between this and the other music that he's done is that every time he does an album, he changes. He never releases a copy of the album before, which can alienate fans or you lose fans or maybe gain new fans. But with this blues project, it's going to be, one genre of music that we're going to do. And, we'll build a fan base slowly over time, and it's like AC/DC. When you buy an AC/DC album, you know exactly how it's going to sound. You're not going to be surprised, and I think that's more of the approach for this type of project that we're doing, and it's really important that it's authentic as well. I mean, I put together a pedal board for this tour, and basically within 2 days of rehearsals, I think I had 10 pedals on it. And by the end of the 2 days rehearsals, it made me remove 8 of them. So I just had a tuner and a boost pedal, and that was it.
Wow!
And he was right, actually. I had a what he called a Hammond pedal. It was just a tremolo pedal that I used on one song, and he didn't like that, so I had to take that off as well. But
so it's quite raw and, in quotes, organic, the sound.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. Yeah. Very much so. And Francis has. I've got to say, he's one of the best guitar players I've ever been. Just the sound is in his hands. He just plugs straight into a tube amp, and it's incredible to see him. And
I saw on some of the posts that he's had, he was actually playing slide guitar most of the time.
Yeah, that's a new thing for him. And what most people don't realise is he plays in standard tuning, which if you've ever tried to play a slide, you'll know it's very difficult.
Yeah.
The classic cliche blues licks are often in open E or open G or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's managed to learn to play in standard shit, and I think it sounds like Francis. I don't know, it just sounds like him. Even though it's a new style of playing, it has his touch, and
So you've always been a fan of Francis Dunnery, or certainly when they came out.
They started in '86. I mean, I think, and that was the year I moved to LA. And unfortunately, I mean, this is probably one of the biggest regrets of my life. I was playing at the Whiskey A Go Go one night, and our manager said, "Oh, there's an English band playing at the Roxy, which is just like 100 meters up the street. Do you want to go after the gig? I can fix you in." And because we were in the Whiskey A Go Go, the Doors, Hendrix, all those famous bands that played there, we thought we were so cool. No, we're good. We'll stay here. And then I found out the day after that the English band was Go West, supported by It Bites.
Oh, wow.
Go West, Alan Murphy, who was my favorite guitar player at the time, was playing.
Yeah.
So I would have met him, and then I would have met Francis, of course. And so I really, I think about that often because I would have loved to have met both Alan Murphy and Francis at that time.
Yeah.
But so I kind of followed It Bites from a distance in the States. And then when Francis started doing solo stuff, American Life in the Summertime, I loved that album. I missed the Gully Flats album. And then I got back into him when he released another album.
Yeah.
And then basically from there, I had very little contact with him until 2012 when I saw that he did house concerts, and I booked him through his manager to come to Stockholm and play in my house, and that's when
that's how you got to know him a bit better.
That's how the friendship started. And that was a Monday night, so it wasn't the best night to have a house concert. And I remember him getting out of his car and saying, "I wanted the LA album, the one with American Life in the Summertime. I wanted that show because the shows are based around albums."
Yeah.
And he got out of his car and says, "Hey, is it okay if I do the Gully Flats Boys show?" And I've never heard the album. I said, "Yeah, of course. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome." And it was awesome. They're the most beautiful, like, naked songs, and probably the best for a house concert. So
yeah.
And the great thing is, this is the power of music. I invited about 50 people, and they were a mixture of my clients, my friends, my family, my neighbours. And I'd say out of 52 people, 50 had never heard of Francis Dunnery.
No.
And by the end of the night, he was selling T-shirts and CDs, and my neighbours who could hardly speak English were saying, "This is the best thing we've ever seen." And
What is it about him that sort of attracts people?
I think it's the authenticity of what he does. He's very authentic. What you see is what you get with Francis. There's no, he puts himself at a distance now to the rock star days, and talks about he'd never fit in the leather trousers, and why would he want to? Because that's not who he is right now. Now he's evolved into this person that he is, and I think the stories he tells, which are often life lessons, just resonate with people, and you can see a lot of yourself in. And he's just such a positive explosion of energy. It's just incredible to witness him, and very delicate at the same time when he's doing his acoustic stuff. He doesn't use a PA, he doesn't use a microphone. He just has an acoustic guitar and a plectrum or his fingers, and he just comes into a room and just mesmerizes people. And that is not easy to do. I've played a lot of solo shows myself. It's and that probably is one of the highlights of my career when I played in London, when I opened for him at Bush Hall. I remember Francis taking me to one side before I went out and said, "Now, Quint, listen, when you get out there, people are not going to listen to you. They're going to turn their backs and talk, but don't worry about it. Just enjoy yourself,
Yeah.
I thought, cheers, mate. What a great but when I got out there and I started to play, I could hear the room quieting down almost in rows all the way to the back of the room. And by the time I was finishing my first song, you could hear a pin drop. And that was, obviously that is, some kind of reaction to my songs and what I'm doing. And it's the best feeling in the world, because you're actually connecting with people so much that they feel they would rather listen to you than talk to the man and wait for the main act to come on. So, the other thing about Francis is the energy that he has for all these different projects. Now he's starting a farm, and he's doing his astrology, and he's doing guitar lessons, songwriting lessons. The guy never stops. It's incredible.
No, well, we had him on the show about 6 months ago, and it was one of those shows. I said to him, it'd probably be about 40 minutes or everything, but it went on and on. It was really interesting, and the sort of range of interest that he has.
Yeah.
And his outlook on life, and I know exactly what you mean when you say he's an explosion of personality and stuff. Mm-hmm. He's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so when you went on tour with Tombstone Dunnery, I mean, had you? What was it like in terms of rehearsals? Did it come together quite quickly? Did you go and sort of have a week or two rehearsals before you went out on the road?
No, it started by Francis sent the band members. Originally, we were going to be a 4-piece.
Yes.
And then we got the idea to bring in a keyboard player, just because it adds such a nice dimension to it with a blues keyboard. And so we got this guy called Dan Burnett that none of us had met before and knew. He was recommended through a friend of Francis.
Yes.
So Francis would literally write a song and then send it to us. And because he was writing them on different guitars, the keys were all different. Like one guitar would be tuned down a half step, another guitar would be tuned down a whole step.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out how we were going to do this live, because you couldn't keep retuning your guitar. Anyway, we decided to record play an E flat. So we'd send out a song, and then we'd discuss which parts I was going to play, which parts he was going to play. And he just basically called each musician and, did it over the phone kind of thing, what we're going to do.
Yes.
And over time, the arrangements changed, and maybe some songs got dropped. I think there were about 23 songs from the beginning. I think we ended up playing 16 live. And basically what we did, we went over and had 3 days rehearsal in Phil Beaumont's studio. Phil Beaumont, the drummer, and also Francis' personal manager, I guess you could call him. He's been with him for ages. We had 3 days rehearsal there, and basically just decided, Francis asked me to learn all these slide parts, like 3 days before I went over. Because,
you had to do slide as well?
Well, he asked me to learn all the slide parts because he didn't know who would play rhythm or who would play slide. So we had the option of being able to swap around. But
yes,
in the end, I played all the rhythm stuff, and he could just concentrate on his slide, which I was happy with. I thought that was the best thing. Because I don't know, for me, the identity of this project is a little bit his slide playing and his vocals. Obviously, that's what people hook onto. But so we had 3 days rehearsal, and then that was it. It was like, okay, now we're getting in the bus, and first gig was in Carlisle. It was great. We got offered like one of Britain's biggest blues festivals straight away after that gig. The first.
Which festival was that, Quint?
I'm not sure. I think there's one in Colne in Lancashire that's pretty
Oh,
big.
yeah.
Then there was
Yeah.
one down south, which I can't remember the name of, but it was one of those. And the person who booked us said this is the biggest one, and
Yeah.
you guys should headline it. Which we were like, wow, after one gig, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then that happened as the more gigs we played, the more offers we got to do festivals next year. So
Yeah.
it's looking, and we're going to do an album in February. So
Oh, brilliant.
and the T-shirts went really well. So it's a serious project that Francis.
So I guess after sort of 3 days rehearsal, which to most people wouldn't be an awful lot, but you are accomplished musicians, so that helps. I guess as the tour went on, it sort of you gelled more and more, did you?
We did gel more and more, but the thing was when we rehearsed, like what we did on day one with some of the songs, maybe we changed the arrangements on day two, and maybe even changed the key. And when you say blues, most people think, it's just 3 chords. But Francis has put his own touch to this, so it's not just 3 chords. It's structured, and there are a few diminished chords and a few passing chords that are in there, and so it was basically about remembering what the latest arrangement was when we played live, because we changed a few of the songs so many times that but yeah, we did gel more and more as it went on, and the last few gigs. I thought.
Were they all in? I mean, obviously blues tends to be 1 or 2 keys, but were a lot of them in the same key?
Yeah, they were actually. But Francis being Francis is pretty smart. So what we would do when we had 2 songs that were in the same key, following each other, after one song finished, you'd get the keyboard player to play a little noodling in between, transpose it to another key. So maybe if we were in E, he'd play something in D and then end it, and then I'd start a riff in E, and it would sound like we lifted and changed key. So
very good. That's an interesting thing. Yeah,
that's Francis for you. The other thing I learned from Francis, I've been playing guitar for 40 years, but I learned so much on this tour. Small things you never think about. Like when you're sound checking, play exactly like you're going to play when you play live, because the sound engineer is going to EQ your guitar accordingly. And singing too, when I was doing my backing vocals and just checking them out.
You see, that's an interesting one, because being a guitarist myself, I've got this band with Greg. Mm-hmm. I've always sort of, when I've had the sound check, I've always gone up to number 8 or something on the guitar and had a little bit in reserve. And I guess a lot of guitarists do that.
They do, and I was doing that too. And Francis pulled me up and said, "Look, just put your guitar on full the whole time. Leave the amp." And he's saying, it was describing how at certain times during rehearsal, he said, "You're not fitting in with the band. You're either too loud or you're too low. You need to find your volume." Yeah. So when Francis is singing, he's listening to every instrument, and if there's anything that jars or doesn't feel right, it'd stop us and say, it's too loud, or it's the wrong. It's too trebly, or he's listening to the big picture, and I've got to say that he was right. And it was a lot easier to do the gig, because once your guitar's on full, you can just concentrate on playing. You're not trying to get louder or
no. And I guess you're sort of handing ownership of the sound then to somebody else, aren't you?
Yeah, and we had the best sound guy.
No more variables.
No more variables. We had the best sound guy. We had Phil Brown, who had just come back from Germany, been doing Marillion. I think he's in Russia now with Steve Hogarth doing solo shows, and he recorded every show every night. And I used to make these little promo videos on the bus for the next gig, like take a video from YouTube and put our music on it, just like 20 seconds, and say, get the tickets, blah blah blah. So we were hearing how we sounded every day, and his recordings were just incredible. They were fantastic. So much clarity, and so that was a good thing too, because we got feedback as to how it sounded live. Because it never sounds the same on stage. There's always a.
And did you have opportunities to play sort of lead guitar solos yourself?
I got one solo on one song, which probably will change over time. But I don't mind. I enjoy playing rhythm. I enjoy the Keith Richards of the band.
It looked truly sort of in the and I mean this in the best possible way, quite understated with the Telecaster.
Yeah, I wanted to take a guitar. The reason I chose the Telecaster was. I was traveling with a guitar, so I wanted a guitar that I knew if they made me put it in the hole, it could stand being thrown around, because that's and I had a good flight case for it. Yeah, but I had a Gibson 339, which is like a smaller version of a 335, which probably would have been a better guitar because there's more tonal options on that. Yeah, but I ended up using the Tele, and a lot of people said they thought it sounded great, and it was a good contrast to what Francis was using, which was a Hofner hollow semi-acoustic.
Yeah, I think a Telecaster is a lovely guitar.
Yeah, and it's been there since 52. So If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
No, exactly. And how would you describe the blues that you play? Are there any other bands that people could sort of listen to and think, well, yeah, that if I go and see Tombstone Dunnery, that's what they're going to sound like? I know it won't be exactly the same, but
No,
can you give any examples?
I couldn't really give you an example, but what I can say is that Francis is so intent on it being authentic. We did a Robert Johnson song, and that is, I just played dum 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 an A note the whole song. That's all I played, and he played acoustic and slide, and we sang. We went out into the audience and got him to sing along. That was kind of a high point in the night.
So it's quite rootsy.
It's very rootsy, and we have these other songs that have some riffs that are not exactly blues. But for me, it's what sets us apart from other blues bands that we have Francis's songs and his riffs. And we were discussing this on the bus about the album, which songs we're going to leave off and which songs we're going to record. And Francis wants it to be really authentic and really pure, which might cost us ditching some of the songs that I thought set us apart from other bands. But Francis knows what he's doing. So, but we have some songs that have riffs in that are, pretty heavy. It's blues, but it's still very heavy. You could almost say that it's going off into another genre of music. And he wants to avoid that because he wants us to be exactly what it says on the tin, blues, authentic.
And going back to your own work, Quint, how do you sort of set out writing a song? And you mentioned about that one that sort of to do with Hollywood and your girlfriend leaving you temporarily and all that sort of thing. And that was an inspiration. But how do you sort of come out with the actual music itself, the melody?
I think a lot of it is, it's like, it's just hard work. And for me, it's so much easier to write a song when I have a story that's true because, I have friends that write songs and I know how hard it is to write a song that's good lyrically, I said that about I was talking to Francis. He has a blues song, one of the songs, and he said one of the lyrics was, "It's hard to love a woman with a perfect face." And he says so much in that one line. You've got the beauty of a woman, you've got the troubles involved in loving a woman that's so beautiful, you've got the heart. It just says so much, and it's hard to write lyrics that connect like that. A friend has just sent me some lyrics now, and it's a nice song, but you can tell that the lyrics are constructed to make up a story that's not really true. And I think when you have something to write about, it's a lot easier because you can actually, first of all, if it's something like that Hollywood song where I was heartbroken, it's easier to convey your feelings, and the feeling comes back to you when you're writing the song. And maybe that suggests melodies. It's a bit like John Lennon said. I mean, he said you just have, all the songs are out there. You just have to put up your antenna and reel one in. Yeah, I think it's kind of like that. You start recording and or strumming on your guitar, and something comes, and you say
something comes. And you're there. You're the sort of means to an end almost. Yeah. It's there anyway.
And then there's, of course, the amount of skill you have and skill set. I mean, I was listening to Don McLean yesterday. I saw a documentary where they played the original demo of American Pie, where it was him just recording his first idea, and he played right up until February made me shiver, and all the lyrics up to that point were just coming from his mind spontaneously.
Really?
And they ended up on the record.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And that is amazing. And it's about capturing that, because often you tend to, I think everybody does this, you get a chord progression and then you get lyrics in your head, but they're not really there. So you kind of phonetically make a sound, and then that sound sounds like a word, and then it just seems to come together. And, all my best songs, I wrote for EMI for like 7 years, and those songs were just made up. They were, they would give you a list and say, hey, Britney's making an album, think Cher meets Prodigy or something, and you get a brief, and it was like building a house to a plans that had been submitted.
Contrived.
And it was contrived, yeah. And I think you connect more with people when you write from your heart, and, it's a situation most people have been in,
But it's interesting, I think, that on one hand, somebody such as yourself, an accomplished guitarist, you're then doing what I would consider to be a totally different skill set, which is, wordsmithing. Yeah.
I've written a lot of music for TV and a lot of commercials, and the client's wish is to get their slogan or their message across in such a short time as possible.
Yeah.
Because they want to advertise their wares in the
and these are mainly in Sweden, are they, Quint?
Yeah, I've done Sweden. I've done some stuff for England. I've done some stuff for my friend in New York. So it varies, but mostly Sweden. I've had a great career doing that,
Yeah.
and so it's interesting for me to suddenly meet a guy like Francis who says, hey, make an album. You're a muso.
Yeah.
And then make a proper album, and then get out on tour and support him, and then join 2 bands that he's in. It's amazing.
And are there any if any listeners want to hear any of your advertising, or perhaps remember any of the advertising, are there any UK based advertisements that people might be familiar with?
Nothing that's running now, but
No.
I did one for 81180. It was the Directory of Inquiries. That was a pretty good one. It was like a punk thing that I did.
Directory Inquiries.
Yeah.
And it was a punk thing, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
81180. That kind of thing.
I bet that's on YouTube somewhere.
It will be, yeah. Unfortunately, my website has just, I haven't updated my company website for years, and it's just died, actually, because the WordPress is so old that it doesn't work anymore. So, and I think the world has changed. I think now you need to reach people quicker. So I think I'm probably just going to do an Instagram account for my company, because you can just, that's where people look now. They're on the phones, and nobody goes into websites, I don't think.
They don't seem to now. It's more Instagram stories in particular, isn't it?
Exactly. So, so I mean, I got used to saying a lot with very few, with words, trying to maximize the message in very few words.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing, to make something as short as possible, but as memorable as possible.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to the next album. So what other, you mentioned about the recording of the album with Francis, the Tombstone Dunnery Blues Project.
Yeah.
You've got the new album coming out hopefully fairly soon in the new year. What other projects have you got coming up, Quint?
Well, we're going to do the It Bites tour in January, which is looking good. Sold out in Manchester and London. I think the other 2 are Glasgow and Wolverhampton are almost sold out.
Yeah.
We're going to do the album with Tombstone, and then there's going to be a new It Bites album that we're all going to be involved in, which is great.
Fantastic.
Pete Jones on keyboards, as usual, who's also Camel.
So he was the original It Bites keyboard player, was he?
No, he wasn't actually.
Did you mention Camel then?
Yeah, but Pete's been with Francis about 5 years, I think, now. So he's been a keyboard player. But no, the only original member in Francis Dunnery, It Bites, is Francis Dunnery.
Yeah, yeah.
So Bob and the other guys have their own thing, I think, with someone else. But
yeah. Oh, I look forward to that then. And you'll be touring. Yeah, well, you are touring in the UK. You mentioned a couple of
we're in the
dates
UK.
there.
I'm probably going to do some house concerts in the UK as well when it gets towards like spring, summer time there.
Yeah.
I've booked a few already. So
I noticed that Francis was quite enthusiastic about promoting Wolverhampton.
Yeah, it's a bigger venue than we played last time. I think we played Slade Rooms last time, and this is KK Steel or something, which is supposed to be a much more passing venue for our type of band. So I'm looking forward to that. Basically, I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be recording some more. I've written a few more songs that I want to get recorded. I don't know if it's going to be an album or an EP, but I think that the trick is now is to get material out and keep a constant flow to keep your fan base interested, and rather than take a year to make an album and then put it out and then wait another year or whatever. So I think maybe I'm going to do get this album out and then maybe do song for song. And then maybe make an album of, if you release 12 things over a year, one a month, whatever, just put it out.
Yeah, I mean, it shows my age now, but I remember in the 70s, you'd get bands like T-Rex and they'd bring a single out and then another one. Yeah. And the albums they were coming out, but it was more, I think the interest was more the singles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Francis said an interesting thing when I made my first album. He said, normally when you make an album, you've got 3 really good songs and the rest are kind of fillers. But he was very, in fact, I was blown away. We were having a discussion. This sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I'm so proud of the fact that I heard these words come from Francis Dunnery's mouth. He said that he wore my album out when it came out, playing it in his car. And he said, you know what, mate, it's one of my top 5 albums of all time. And I thought, did anybody record that?
It is a very good album. And when we first spoke to each other about 18 months ago, I had the album on myself quite a lot. And every song is a potential sort of single, I think.
No, thanks. Well, that's and I didn't set out to make it like that. I didn't set out to make any singles. I just set out to record those songs. And,
that's great.
Because it's so personal, it probably resonates with.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you. I'll put all your links, which I've already got,
Yeah,
Quint on the
my
show
artist
notes.
site is quintstarkie.net, which is probably the site to go in on if you want to
Yeah.
find what I'm up to. And I usually I usually post my gigs on there as well. So
Oh, well, that's great. All right. Well, we look forward to
it's been
seeing you in
lovely
the
talking
new
to you,
year.
and I love all your work. I listen to all your podcasts, and it's nice to get a little glimpse into other people's journeys through life, and
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
it's very interesting.
Which is
Must
why
be
we do
fun
it,
for
really.
you to talk to all these people, and
Yeah, it's a privilege, really.
yeah. Well, I
Great.
hope we meet next time we're in the UK, and we can come to a gig and come back.
Definitely.
That way.
Well, thanks very much then, and great talking to you. Thanks, Quint.
Oh, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I would be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.